the one in which we wrap season 1. Welcome to Supernatural First Watch Podcast, a rewatch podcast designed to be spoiler-free and enjoyed as if it's your first watch. I'm your host, Kimberly, a self-proclaimed sci-fi and fantasy fan, and previously on Supernatural, we were in the town of Salvation, where the brothers Winchester reunited with their father and decided to bring the fight to the creature that attacked their mother, and they split and shenanigans happened. So let's rejoin to find out what's happened to John and how Sam and Dean are going to address it. So we get another special opener in our previously on segment of John Winchester narrating that they've been doing this their whole life, to another awesome soundtrack and a couple of screen grabs. But this time it's more of the family focus and hunting down whatever it is that killed their mother. We get a nice summary of the previous episode as well, exactly what happened, how the family split up, and that something has happened to John. And we tune back into what we tuned out on last episode, where Meg has called Dean and is telling them they have truly screwed up. Dean, so we continue back on, and the narrative keeps going immediately. So Dean passes on the message, and Sam's like, I want to stick around and wait for them to attack so they have a chance of shooting them. Dean explains, that they're underprepared and that they need to regroup. They need a plan, and so they should leave and head to Lincoln. Sam is somewhat already treating this as if their father is truly dead, but Dean doesn't want to think that way. And he's hoping that the demon is wanting some sort of trade. They realize they can't do it on their own and they need help. And so we pan to a quaint little house with blue siding and a dog hanging out on a blue truck and meet Bobby. We get no explanation. We get no introductions. Apparently, Bobby knows everything and has all kinds of fun books. He knows more than they do about demonic possession and shares that normally he only hears from them about 3 or 4 times a year. So this is our first introduction to another hunter that they are actually interacting with. And it's clear from the dialogue that they know each other, obviously. And of course, as we hear, Bobby says they only hear from them about 3 or 4 times a year, but that's also a little confusing because the first time they dealt with a demonic possession way back in like episode 4 of Phantom Traveler, Dean was like, yeah, I've never really done this before. I don't know of anything about this. And they were really relying on their own research. So if they've already known Bobby, my question is always, well, why didn't they contact him before? Who is this person that randomly they know they've had a relationship with and they've built rapport with? But we tune back into the story, and he says, normally he only hears about 3 or 4 demonic possessions a year, and this time he's heard of 27. But the last time he and John met, he threatened to fill him full of buckshot. So apparently the trend of John alienating everyone in his life continues to hold true. But Bobby says, he was ready to let things by the wayside. And this, of course, reminds us that Pastor Jim also said he hadn't talked to John in quite some time. And they start briefly talking about protective circles, and their game plan is interrupted by the door flinging open and Meg walking in. She threatens them and looks all menacing, throws Dean across the room with her telekinesis, and starts harping on Sam about how she is unimpressed with the Winchester family so far, and that John was nothing. He gave the gun to them, and she wants it back from the brothers. And she's like, did you honestly expect that I wouldn't find you? But of course, this is all a trap, because apparently they made some sort of arrangements, or they just knew that Bobby would already have this ready to go, because he replies that he was counting on it. And she looks down and notices that she is in a devil's trap. And I guess that inside the devil's trap, she can no longer use her powers, but then it's unclear as to how extensive that was, because she was able to fling Dean across the room when she walked in, but we'll dive into that a little bit later. And they try to interrogate Meg to find out where John is, the information she has about the creature that killed their mother, anything like that. And Bobby takes them aside and says, you know what, you're torturing a girl. Dean and Sam are not wanting to hear that, but he is explaining to them that the girl must be possessed by a demon, and that's the way it works. So she isn't a demon, she is possessed by a demon. So instead of trying to continue interrogating her, they decide to try an exorcism. And this is one incredibly slow exorcism full of all kinds of words and phrasing and super long. And there's an interruption of the actual ritual, which most shows that I have seen, at least, and most tenets of anywhere you hear about magic, states that if the ritual is interrupted, it usually won't work or it'll go wrong. But they continue to perform this exorcism really long in between bits of dialogue, and Meg is insisting, or the demon, I guess, possessing Meg, now that we know, Meg is insisting that John is dead. Until they get very close to the end, where she says actually that he's in a building in Jefferson City, but she doesn't know where the demon is that they're hunting, and that's all she knows. Dean's like, yeah, I'm not sure I believe her, so let's finish the exorcism, because she was under the impression, I guess, that if she told them what they wanted to know, she would get to stay in this poor girl's body. Bobby tells them that most likely the girl is dead inside because they saw her fall off a building. So the only thing animating her is the demon. Sam wants to use her in her demon form, and Dean is adamant that they put the innocent girl out of her misery. She shouldn't be made to suffer anymore, and they should finish the exorcism. So they do manage to finish it, only to be shocked to find out that the girl is still alive, but she cannot move. And she thanks them for letting her free and lets them know she's been possessed for a year and saw most of what happened while the demon was controlling her body. Sometimes she was awake. She can never move her own body, and while rendering aid, they take the opportunity to talk to her to find out, well, it was the demon telling the truth. So I guess the big light show with the smoke and the swirls really does convince them that the demon has been exorcised, but because she's able to speak, Dean is not opposed to taking the opportunity to find out if what she was saying was true, even though he was the one who was adamant that they free her. And so a couple of quandaries to wonder about here about demonic possession, which we'll dive into a little bit later as well. And she continues the conversation and says that, yeah, that is where their father is, in Jefferson City. But the other demon they're looking for isn't there. They want to know that that's where they're keeping their father is, and he's trapped. And she says, yeah, but the demon they want is in another building and nearby. And she mentions sunrise, but she's not sure. And then she passes away, or she's near to it, is pretty much the consensus. But Bobby encourages them, hey, look, you got your answers. Leave before the cops show up. And he hands them a really huge, nifty-looking book, tells them best of luck, and to bring John around when they find him, because, he's going to have to deal with the cops, but he's not worried about it. So, cut to a new scene. We're parked on the side of a river somewhere, and they're getting ready. And Sam is drawing devil's traps on Dean's trunk. And, of course, Dean is not happy about having to make drawings on the car. And they have a conversation about how they need to rescue their father, but they should leave the gun behind. It's the only leverage they have. They have to save the bullets only for the demon. Can't be just for any demon. And Dean observes that Sam and their father are way more alike than they want to admit. They're both eager to sacrifice themselves for the cause, and that it's incredibly selfish. All they care about is revenge, and he's going to one who has to bury them. So at the end of this conversation, we don't really get any sort of resolution. It's not clear if they are or are not going to bring the gun, I don't think. And then they walk along the river and realize, oh, there's a sunrise apartment really near the river. Now, again, geography is a thing. Jefferson City is not a huge city, but it's still sizable. I think it has well over 100,000 people. It is the capital of the state of Missouri. So this idea that they could just be walking along and be like, oh, hey, look, there's sunrise apartments. She had mentioned that they're in a building nearby, but it just raises all kinds of questions for me about, oh, look, happenstance. And because of plot, we actually got to find the building. So they see the name of the sunrise apartments. They're like, oh, this must be what Meg was talking about. And they determine that pulling the fire alarm is the only way to get the civilians out of the way and to give them a disguise to be able to break in. So Sam walks in, he pulls the alarm, they break into a fire truck, get extra uniforms, and then they decide that if there's anyone still left in the building, it's a good chance that they're demons. So they use their EMF detector, which I guess can also detect demonic activity, not just ghost activity. And they find the apartment they're looking for. They get the door opened as the fire department, pretending to be the fire department. And they subdue the demons inside, which is a couple waiting in the room. And they throw the holy water at them in super soakers, which is kind of cool. And then they lay a salt line around a closet entry and shove them into it. And then they go into another room and they find Dad tied to the bed. And to make sure he's not possessed, they squirt him with holy water too. He doesn't flinch, I guess, but it's clear that he has been beat up. But he's breathing, so he must be alive. So they untie him from the bed, and he wakes up. And he's like, oh, good boys. And then we go back to the crowd, and apparently salt prevents demons from crossing a salt line, but it does not prevent them from unpossessing the people they're in and possessing somebody else, I guess, because we see a random passerby and a fireman are now possessed by the demons, and so they go to break into the apartment building. Dean, Sam, and John escape out the window, laying a salt line behind, but they get jumped as they leave. One of them is beating Sam up really, really badly, and Dean doesn't have a choice, so he shoots him through the head with the Colt, wasting a bullet, and they retreat to Bobby's. So I do believe, I can't remember if we know where Bobby is right now, but I'd be very curious again to know. They were in Iowa, then they went to Bobby. I think they were also in Nebraska recently, and now they're in Missouri, and then they're going to go back to Bobby. And I'm like, okay, we're in the United States, are Dean and Sam, and how close are they actually? And is John so badly injured that he's just going to stay passed out, I guess, for hours? I'm not really sure. But they retreat, and instead they don't go to Bobby's, they just go to a random house. And Dean has a bit of a crisis because he realizes the person he shot was also being possessed by a demon, that they could have been alive inside, and that even though all of them had kind of agreed that if Meg's body was being possessed by a demon, Meg herself would have been dead at that point because of the header off the building, but that when she was unpossessed, we found out that she was actually alive. So Dean is having a bit of a crisis here because he realizes that the person he shot, yes, it killed the demon, but it probably also killed the person, obviously, he was being possessed by. And he comes to the realization he's a little afraid of what he's willing to do for his family. And we're going to dive into this deeper into the grays of hunting as well. But his father comes out and says, you know what, it's okay. I'm not mad at you for saving Sam. I'm proud of you. And they get a little bit of a breeze. They feel it, both of them, of course, which is always an indication of, uh-oh, bad things are about to happen inside of a horror film. And then the lights flicker. So, of course, they know something really bad is about to happen. Sam goes off to check the salt lines. And John's insistent they hand over the gun so that he can, take advantage. He wants the opportunity to shoot the creature that killed his wife, blah, blah, blah. And Dean comes to realization. After this lovely heart-to-heart where John's like, I'm proud of you, all of these things, Dean realizes, yeah, his father would never tell him that. So he says, you know what? My father wouldn't be proud. He'd be pissed about me wasting a bullet. You're not my father. So he points the gun again at his father, who, yep, now we can see is clearly possessed. Even though John keeps claiming he's not, Dean's lost his mind. Sam comes back in the room. He doesn't seem 100% sure, but because Dean is adamant, he's like, okay, you know what? I'm going to listen to Dean. Sam doesn't listen to his father, although it does seem to be hard for him to do this in this instance, because usually Sam doesn't want to take his father's orders, but he does seem reluctant to not take his father's orders in this instance. So he sides with his brother. And John's like, okay, fine, if you're sure, go ahead and shoot me. Of course, Dean is looking at the visage of his father. He finds it very difficult. He doesn't want to shoot. And then we do see old yellow eyes come across John's face because, yep, he's possessed. But not only is he is possessed by the yellow-eyed demon, who is the one that killed their mother and killed Jess. So I also want to know, right, the holy water didn't do anything to him. But he's like, yeah, you know what? I've got proof you're not going to kill me. And so he proceeds to pin both of them to the wall. And he shares that because he's such a high-level demon, holy water doesn't bother him. But that the two demons they killed, both Meg earlier, I guess, who they removed the possession from, and then the one they actually did shoot, that those two demons were his children. So he begins to taunt them with the murders of their other family. And he's doing something to Dean we can't really quite tell, but Dean is clearly in a lot of pain, and blood is dripping from all kinds of places on Dean's body. Both Dean and Sam are begging their father to stop and begging the demon to stop. And suddenly, even though from everything we've seen, no one can actually half the time even see what the demon is doing, much less wrangle control of their body. John manages to wrangle the demon's attention and take over, but only briefly. Dean is in super bad shape, and Sam uses the opportunity because he's free to grab the Colt, but also can't shoot his father. He's finding it difficult, even though John is begging him, shoot me now, end this now. So even though technically we're supposed to believe it's their father and he's begging Sam to shoot him, Sam won't do it. But he does shoot him in the knee. Even though he did manage to shoot his father, but not to kill, and Dean is begging him not to shoot their father. And we see a whole bunch of black smoke leaving John, which of course is our indicator that the demon has left the building. Again, is this another trick? Is it not? Let's find out. And John is really pissed at Sam. He thought they were on the same page, that killing this demon came above everything else. He's very angry that Sam couldn't shoot him. And Sam says, it's okay, we'll start over. And so they all pile into the car because Dean is clearly in need of medical attention. And they're almost at the hospital when a demon takes over a truck driver who hits them side on and pushes them off the road. And that is where we end season 1 of Supernatural. All of our protagonists are covered in blood, hanging off the side of a road in a crashed car. And we don't know what's going to happen next. So, this episode obviously picks up exactly where the last one dropped off. Dean and Sam had been staking out a home where they were pretty sure the demon was going to show. They weren't able to kill the demon. It set the house on fire. At the same time, John was meeting with the Colt to make a deal. He had an escape plan, but apparently not good enough. And we had ended the previous episode with Meg saying, oh boy, you really screwed up. And this episode pretty much continues where we were from the previous. So a lot of our sections aren't going to be very relevant. Our demons of the week are the yellow-eyed demon that is responsible for Dean and Sam's mother dying, and of course for the murder of Jess as well. We see Meg again, which is always fun, and find out that she is also a demon, but she, again, like, they're possessed by a demon. It's not a single person. So this demon can jump from body to body. So the really important thing for us to remember is that if they have ever seen the yellow-eyed demon so far in their plane, I would assume it's never actually been the same person, the same body, the same look, because it's been in possession. And the yellow eyes are an indicator, I guess, of a much higher tier demon. I'm not really up on the hierarchy of demons, so I'm excited to dive into that and find out more as we progress through the seasons, I assume. But there are lower level demons. That's your normal black smoke, your normal black eyes, and your normal reaction to holy water causing smoking and pain, I would assume. But the yellow eyes is a higher tier demon, supposedly. So those normal things don't actually affect the yellow-eyed demon. So there isn't really a local legend. They don't really pretend to be anybody because this story just really rolls on in to what's going on next. So where are we? Where in the USA are Sam and Dean? So once again, geography is a thing. And not all of it's easy. So at least Iowa, and so in our last episode, I do believe we had established that they were in Salvation, Iowa, and that John, I believe, if I remember correctly, was called to Lincoln, Nebraska. So he was in Nebraska. The boys were in Iowa, and the location that they're given is in Jefferson City. So Nebraska is one state. Iowa is another state, and Missouri is another state. And while they are actually next to each other, they're not close, once again. Jefferson City is in the middle of Missouri, so even from top to bottom or side to side, it's going to take at least 3 hours, which is somewhat more doable than our perception of, they were on their way to somewhere from Minnesota to Texas, which are definitely not close to each other. But Lincoln, Nebraska, and St. Louis, Missouri, if I remember correctly, are like 5 or 6 hours apart as well. So, the question is always, how close is all of this stuff happening? So the big one I want to know is, where is Bobby located? Because, at the beginning of this episode, both Sam and Dean are kind of torn. One of them wants to race off to Lincoln, and see if they can't confront the demon there. They've been given their directions, right? And then they're like, no, we need help. Let's go to Bobby. And so how close is Bobby? How much time does it take for them to regroup? How much time does it take for them to make the decision to actually move on to seeking out help so they can figure out what's happened with their father? Those are always good things to keep in mind. The body count this week, we do see the perceived death of the actual Meg this week. We also, of course, it's unclear, though, about where all of the other deaths are coming from. So, for example, we do see Dean shoot the demon, which is supposedly the son of the yellow-eyed demon that has been haunting them. So that's one body, but we don't ever get that person's name per se. Meg, of course, passes as well. It's unclear if the couple that was in the apartment that they attacked to get to their father, I assume they're still alive, because then the demons went to go possess somebody else and they did not kill them before putting them in the closet, but it's not clear. And we assume there was no other collateral damage while this showdown was happening. But again, like, how much of an impact, how many other people have to die to keep the Winchesters alive? That's a really good question for us to contemplate, right? So this episode keeps the it keeps the tension high. It keeps the story rolling. It really does do a lot for building the momentum that they have been building over the course of an entire year. I do find it really interesting that the intro of Previously On, essentially, for the previous episode was more about the demon hunting. Like, it was a brief reminder, hey, here's where their story starts, but they're going out, they're hunting things, and they're protecting people. And this episode, the opening sequence of reminder, here's the Previously On, is more about their family story. So again, like, that Previously On segment really does tell us what we're going to see in each of these episodes. And I find that really an interesting use of the Previously On segment. But also, we do dive in deeper into the story of what's happened with their family. What does all of this mean? What are the questions, et cetera, et cetera. So before we get into the family drama, which is, of course, most of this episode, and it is the keystone of everything that's happening here, I want to talk a little bit about the Grays of Hunting first. So we have always seen that Sam is driven by revenge and a search for knowledge. He wants to find out what happened to Jess, he wants to find out what's responsible, and he wants to get his revenge, essentially. The only reason he agrees to go and find their father after Jess dies is because he wants to find out what happened. And a good portion of the season up till now, of course, until they reunited when hunting the vampires, it's been a search. Where is Dad? Where is Dad? But their motives have been very different. Dean's motive is he wants to find his father. He wants to make sure he's okay. He wants to help him in any way, shape, or form he can. Sam's motive has always been he believes their father has information and he wants it. And he wants to know so he can get his revenge. And Dean calls Sam out on this, right? They're having the conversation and Sam's all gung-ho. He's like, I want to hunt this creature down. I want to hunt this creature down. And Dean shares that it's actually a very selfish perspective, right? But also we can see that Sam's entire drive for making this happen is also not that altruistic. He is willing to use what everyone has agreed is essentially an animated corpse to hunt down the demon that killed his girlfriend, with no regard to the body that's being possessed. They even have this conversation, right? Sam and Dean are both initially horrified to realize that Bobby is explaining to them that if they saw this woman jump out of a building, then yeah, she's being possessed and she's most likely dead inside. And this brings up all kinds of questions like, well, how do you animate a corpse for that long? It's been, at least 4 or 5 months, I would think, since that confrontation in Chicago. She says she's been possessed for a year. So if the creature, the person that the demon is inhabiting dies, well, then how long can the demon keep it animated? Because there's no soul to keep the body alive. Like, how does that work? Does the demon soul replace that? What are the logistics of that, if you will? What are the logistics of a person being possessed by a demon, how much does that person really truly remember? We only have a very brief conversation with Meg. But the thing to keep in mind, right, is that how do you fight something that's using an innocent, right? How do you fight something that's by its very nature and definition is not the ultimate person that's going to be harmed, right? So Sam and Dean are happy to torture, essentially, Meg, the demon, using holy water, inflicting pain because they need answers. And then Bobby informs them, wait, there's a girl in there. And they're like, wait, what? So suddenly they're like, well, I don't want to inflict pain on this person. And even though they want to know where their father is, they want to know the details, Dean's kind of like, you know what, I bet we're not going to get those answers. And all we're doing is harming a person. So let's do an exorcism. And Sam, of course, is a little reluctant to do that, but eventually agrees. And while they're doing the exorcism, you can see that that makes the demon uncomfortable, right? They're fidgeting, they're kind of desperate. And eventually, right before the end, because Dean is, trying to still get information, but performing the exorcism instead of inflicting harm and damage in the pursuit of knowledge, but still trying to get answers. We see the demon, begging to stay, right? They want to stay possessing this person. And that also brings up lots of questions. Where do they go afterwards? Do they return to hell? How did they get up here? All kinds of questions. But they're like, okay, fine. I'll make a deal with you. I will give you the information you want, but let me stay. And Dean's like, no, you don't have the right to this body. So he's like, no, let's continue on with the exorcism. And of course, the demon is very unhappy. And one of the things I would be very interested to know is this exorcism is really, really long. First off, it's incredibly long. I can't imagine. I'm assuming in the future we're going to see like a shortened version of it. Like maybe there's only 5 phrases you need to say or something, because it's such a long process that it's easy. And this brings up my question. Did the demon leave Meg voluntarily, or did it actually get exorcised? Because we've seen, at least later in the episode, where demons can at least jump bodies behind a salt line. Can they do the same behind a devil's trap? Yes or no? Maybe not. Maybe that's another thing, like it dampens their powers, but also stops them from being able to leave the body they're possessing so that an exorcism works. I assume that's probably one of the reasons why devil's traps exist. But on the same token, like, the question is, she thinks maybe she's going to be able to stay in the body until Dean says, yeah, no, we're still kicking you out, finish the exorcism. Then, they finish and it leaves. But the question I really want to answer, though, is, did it leave voluntarily? Because, what's the advantage of staying? They are aware that they know exactly what Meg looks like. But, for example, if it's able to hop to another body, well, then why not? Because then they can't get exorcised, right? So all of these questions keep popping up for me. But also the thing I find intriguing is, as soon as Dean discovers that it's a person, he's like, let's do an exorcism. Sam's like, are you sure? Do we really want to? He's like, yeah, no, we have to let the poor girl go. Let's do an exorcism. So they start that process, and then eventually she's like, oh, look, here's your information. Can't I stay? To which Bobby informs them most likely the girl is dead because she took a header off of a building. And Sam's like, oh, well, okay then. No problem. Let's use her. Let's use her as leverage. And Dean's like, what? No, you can't use her as leverage. That's a person in there. And we need to finish the exorcism, right? And so I find it so interesting that Bobby thinks the girl's dead inside. She's not. The animating her wall dead thing, I have lots of questions on. I don't think we're going to get answers anytime soon. But Sam's like, I want to use her. And Dean's like, no. She shouldn't be made to suffer anymore. But again, the question is, well, if she's already dead, how can she suffer if she's not there anymore? It's a really moralistic question and related to, presence of a soul, I would think. But Sam immediately jumps to, oh, well, if she's not there, perfect. Let's use the body. And Dean's like, no, that's a person. You need to let her go. So we see this as the obsession that then Dean confronts Sam about, and we've already seen this evidence in their father, that they're willing to do anything to save their family or to avenge their family. And so in the Grays of Hunting, it's like, well, if you're a hunter, but you're willing to use any victim for your own purposes, are you still fulfilling your duty of saving people, for example? Another great question is, Sam has always been driven by vengeance. He's in it to find out what happened to Jess. Even though we've seen him do the research, we've seen him, do the work, right? Even though it's not something related to the death of his girlfriend, we do see him, doing research and investigating other pieces and trying to make that change. But when it comes to this particular case, his reason for doing it and the reason for doing hunting in general, just in the hope of getting more information, has always been for vengeance. So is that really what you want as somebody who's driven to the hunting life, right? Dean is like, no, there's a person in there. We have to let her go, even if we don't get the answers, right? Even if we don't get the answers. And then, we get another really great moral question of, while they're not torturing them, they are causing harm and pain to the demons that are protecting their father in order to get their father out. So Dean's down for that, right? I almost believe that Dean is the one who had the idea to use a super soaker full of holy water, which I find kind of fun. So he's fine with causing impermanent harm and pain, I guess, but, actual death or actual using a body, even when knowing it's something else you can't do. So those are all really just intriguing questions to contemplate, right? Also, we do see, though, that they are concerned with collateral damage because they're like, well, if the demon's in the middle of an apartment building, we can't just light it on fire, right? We have to make sure that civilians are out of the way. But is there a way to prevent demonic possession, right? Because they're like, well, we need to protect the civilians, but they also don't do anything to make sure they can't be possessed. So is there a way to prevent possession, or is there not? It's a really great question as well. And, when confronted with an actual instance of family being in immediate danger, right, which also goes back to the self-defense question for law enforcement, right? And Dean and Sam are kind of a form of law enforcement when it comes to the demonic and supernatural world, right? So when somebody is beating Sam up to the point where Dean is worried for his life, he shoots them. So he realizes, and he's horrified to realize that, oh yeah, he actually did kill a person too. But that goes back to, well, self-defense, right? Where does that fall in? Because while Sam isn't the one who pulled the trigger, Dean did it to save his brother. And what do you do in that instance of somebody threatening the life of another? And this takes me into just another instance of our Daddy Knows Best segment as well, right? We have the moral conundrum with Dean. He was protecting his brother, right? That was his mindset. He wasn't in the place of, I'm going to torture this person or whatever. Apparently, I guess off screen or just without agreeing to it, Dean did bring the Colt with him, obviously. But he shoots the guy who is harming Sam, and that's a form of self-defense, right? But now we have the reverse, where their father is possessed, right? Their father is possessed, and in this Daddy Knows Best segment, we're going to talk a little bit about him. Just why on earth is John able to overcome the possession, right? Or is this another trick? Is this another trick on the part of the demon to pretend that the possession was temporarily overcome just to see if he could, even after harming both of the sons, get them to shoot him? Or is this something else, right? Like, the very idea that John, without any sort of rhyme or reason, is able to overcome a demonic possession where everything we have seen up to this point is people are kind of trapped in their own body. That's what Meg even says, is that most of the time she was aware of what was going on, but she did not know. She couldn't control her body. She was kind of just viewing it. If she was aware of what was going on, she was unable to do anything. So why is John able to wrest control? Or is this one of those things that John has been waiting to meet up with his sons for because he wanted to make sure he had some sort of training to be able to wrest control from the demon? I'm not entirely sure. Like, was this a backup of a backup of a backup plan for John that he was going to if, he went to all that trouble to plan his escape, he blessed the water, did all of these things, but was this his backup of a backup for him to get possessed and just thinking that his sons would then be willing to shoot him because he left the gun with them? So just all kinds of questions really about the likelihood of, was it actually John begging Sam to shoot him? And did he actually manage to somehow overcome the possession? Or, as we can see, Dean is covered in blood at this point, right? When they get into the car to rush him to the hospital, I would assume. So because he's so covered in blood, maybe the yellow-eyed demon realized that, Dean was going to be beyond saving at that point, so he could continue the ruse and see if he could get Sam to shoot him or not. For what kind of nefarious plan beyond that, I don't know, but maybe that was why. So was it truly their father? Who knows? But I want to talk about that moment after. We see the black smoke leave, and John immediately, instead of saying, "Are you okay?" instead of saying, "Go check on your brother," instead of saying, "Thanks for the rescue," he starts berating his son for not shooting him. And I understand that, this has been his lifelong mission. This has been the thing that has driven him for over 20 years, finding Mary's killer. But to put your child in that position, which also then, of course, lends credence to the idea that somehow John was able to actually wrest control enough to beg his sons to shoot him. But, to go through this incredibly painful and scary and trauma-layered experience, and instead of the first words out of his mouth being, "Go check on your brother," which I definitely think is in line with what we've seen from their father so far, he doesn't say that. He says, "Why didn't you kill me? You should have killed me." Not even expanding on so many other pieces to that. And maybe he does feel that there is no other way, and he'd rather be the one to sacrifice himself than to con some other poor soul into getting possessed by the demon so that then they could use the Colt on him. And I think this is just such a dichotomy, right? Because on the one hand, maybe John didn't want to endanger anybody else. So he set it up so that when they came after him, he's like, well, I have a Colt now. I have a way to kill them. And now I know there is no other way. The only way to do it is to kill the demon and the body it's getting possessed, so I might as well be that body. But if that was the case, then this is an instance of John's inability to actually speak with his sons and tell them anything he doesn't think they need to know. Because if that was his plan all along, he needs to let his kids know that that's the plan. Right? I mean, to be confronted, to not even know where you're going to be taken, even if there is a huge question mark if his sons were even going to be able to find him, or there was a huge question mark of would the demon even possess him, or would the demon just beat him up and leave him as bait, but still not possess him? And I'm also curious to know, the higher level demon says, hey, my level of demonhood means that holy water doesn't affect me. But we saw, as soon as the demons in the apartment were locked behind the salt line, they went in and possessed somebody else, I assume. I assume that there weren't just extra demons hanging around and then going for a possession. I'm assuming that, especially since there are only two of them, I'm assuming the two left the couple and then went into two other bodies. So we've seen how quickly they can get possessed. And especially in the scene with the firefighter, I believe, we don't see smoke enter him, really. He just kind of suddenly has black eyes, I believe. Or, there was a lot of chaos going on when they're escaping the apartment. So when did their father get possessed? Was he always possessed and tied to the bed just to make it seem like they were actually going to be able to make an escape? Or did he get possessed in the process of escaping because they figured that was the best way to get access to the Colt, right? Maybe that was the plan, right? They would come to rescue their father, and then the demon would possess him after they were assured it was their father, so they would hand over the gun. All kinds of questions. I'm not sure we're going to get any sort of answers anytime soon on this, but the other piece, really just to dive in a little bit, is this really showcases the type of upbringing John gave them, right? We had the little heart-to-heart a couple of episodes ago where he claims to Sam that he wanted him to go to college and he wanted Dean to have a home. But then he immediately just jumps on berating his son for not shooting their father. And I think also there's some credence as well that John kind of figured Sam would be the one more likely to shoot him. Like he begs Dean to do it because he doesn't think Dean's going to disobey an order. But then he might also appeal to, well, Sam kind of hates me, so maybe he'll do it. If it is indeed John who's the one begging them to shoot him because he wrested control of the demon, which I'm not 100% convinced on. But we see this very interesting dynamic where his first instinct isn't even to check on his very injured child because he just witnessed what happened, obviously, since he was aware that Sam is the one who shot him. It's to berate his child for not killing him. And even if it was, let's go check on your son, let's go check on your brother, why didn't you shoot me? Like the first words out of his mouth are, you should have killed me. And I just think that induces so much challenge and so many problems in the relationship between the brothers and their father, and just kind of speaks to that obsession Dean had noticed, is that both of them were being incredibly selfish and aren't in it for protecting anyone. They're not in it for making sure that other people don't fall victim to a demon. They're in it to get revenge. And that is kind of the all-consuming thing. So it is very interesting, right, to note that Dean can't even manage to get off a shot before the demon stops pretending to be docile and attacks. But Sam does manage. And again, it's the difference of the instances, right? There's clearly a fighting going on when Sam's able to shoot their father, but the true attack hadn't happened by the time when Dean has the gun pointed at their father. And that's the other piece I really want to speak to, is that Dean realizes his father would not be proud of him. And how sad is it that realizing their father telling him he's proud is the trigger for Dean realizing that it's not his father he's speaking with. And the other thing to keep in mind here as well is they clearly have to support John out of the apartment building. Like, he can't really move on his own. But by the time they get to the house, John's kind of freestanding. He's just hanging and lurking in his doorway like he does, and says, hey, give me the gun. I want to make sure that we can, after this heart-to-heart, I can shoot the demon that killed Mary. So this really does, of course, again, speak to the type of upbringing they had, and Dean's realization that his father truly does just see him as kind of a soldier. And I also think this speaks to, was John just saying the pretty words to Sam a couple episodes ago so that he could get him on board with the hunt, instead of truly being remorseful for not bringing his kids up the way he had planned to? Lots of questions here, but the fact that the realization that Dean remembers their father saying, you're proud of me, and he's like, wait, no, Dad wouldn't be proud, he'd be mad. Because we saw it, right? We saw it with the vampires, where when they captured the gun, and they're like, yeah, okay, let's use the gun. And he's like, no, we can't use the gun. There's a limited number of bullets. It is only for the demon that killed your mother. We're not using it for anything else. And then, of course, he breaks his own rule, right? He shoots a vampire with the gun to protect Sam. But I also think that was a calculated move as well, because he wanted to double check that the gun would do what it was supposed to, which is kill any creature. And he knows that bullets don't usually kill a vampire, so by testing the gun, he was able to prove that it would kill any creature, so it would probably do what he wanted it to do with the yellow-eyed demon. So again, we have this really sad but profound moment with Dean where he realizes it's not his dad because he said he was proud. So then that also begs the question, like, why is Dean so adamant about following John's orders until a couple of episodes ago? Also, of course, we saw what happened when he didn't follow Father's orders, right? Daddy knows best again, during the flashbacks with the Striga. So we saw that the reason he probably is so gung-ho about following his father's orders is to protect Sam. But that very idea of, I'm proud of you, wait, no, clearly you're not my father because you said you're proud of me. And, this also goes back to some foreshadowing Dean even said of, if the cost is your life, I don't want us to ever find the creature that killed Mom. He's saying it to Sam. I'm sure he also has the same sentiment for his father, though, because he realizes that both of them are willing to die so long as the creature goes with them, and he doesn't want them out of his life. And they're so driven by vengeance. They're so driven by, let me find this creature, let me find this creature. I don't care about collateral damage, and I don't care about my own life. Dean's like, you've got to be invested in your life. Why would you not be? And, very briefly, again, just part of the Grays of Hunting here, Dean is upset at the fact that he killed a person. But also there is that question mark. Well, Meg was possessed for a year and was technically dead inside, or only lived like 30 seconds. Was the person possessing the guy he shot, because it is the son of the creature that has killed their mother? The question really is, how long has he been possessed as well? And how long can someone survive a demonic possession? Like, was the reason Meg was in such bad shape because she flew out of a window, or because she was possessed for a year? Like, which, chicken and egg situation here? Which one is it? And can somebody be saved from demonic possession, right? We saw the guy who was possessing people to crash the plane, of which now we really have no explanation, because we've seen a couple of people now possessed by demons, but they seem to be having an agenda as opposed to just, I must crash this plane, which was always a little strange to me in Phantom Traveler. But we see that guy live, but he also has insane damage to his body, even though he's no longer possessed, from the holy water they throw on him to do the exorcism, 10 months ago that they did in Phantom Traveler. So, all in all, this episode is really powerful. It kind of brings an end, but doesn't, to the story. So I think this also goes in line with where television was at the time. We're in the early 2000s right now. There is a cliffhanger. It's very common, and I think it's still somewhat common to end shows on cliffhangers for finales. But there's a cliffhanger, and you also get teased that you think you're going to get a resolution to the overarching story, right? We did have a couple of what we would call arc episodes where it really focused on the Yellow-Eyed Demon and the hunt for Dad, but then we also had plenty of standalone episodes that didn't really tie in. And so we think we're going to hit an end to the arc, right? They even observe in the previous episode, wow, I can't believe that after tonight, this 20-year search is going to be done. Of course it's not, right? Because at this point, they don't know where the Yellow-Eyed Demon is now. Dean is in super bad shape. Their father's probably not in great shape either. He also has a gunshot wound. And Sam is driving the car that gets essentially pushed off the road by a tractor trailer. So, a great cliffhanger. Don't know what's going to happen. Were Dean's injuries so serious he could have survived in a hospital? I don't even know. But now, after getting into a massive car crash, and there's no one around them, right? We pan out on essentially an empty highway. And of course, the truck driver himself is the one who's possessed. So how does that work? It also begs the question around, how do all of these demons know where these people are? So my assumption, when we would see, for example, Meg meeting up with Dean and Sam in Chicago, was that she had been tracking them, or she had been tracking their father. And that's kind of how she decided to make the shadows appear, the devas appear in Chicago to bring John out of hiding, which also, again, speaks to some sort of tracking, right? We also saw her attack John's friends to bring him out of hiding and to get him to come and agree to a meet. But if the demons can just randomly possess a passerby so easily, but also randomly possess a random truck driver that they hope is going to be close enough to actually intercept the car, how much knowledge, how much awareness do they have of Earth? How much awareness do they have without eyeballs, if you will, right? Because it stops possessing their father. We see the smoke leave, so we see the demon leave, and then they get into a car and start driving. And it's not clear, like, how far into the drive they are when they get hit by this tractor trailer. Sam is saying, hey, we're almost there. I'm assuming they're actually close to a hospital, but they seem to be in the middle of nowhere. So how long have they been driving? And how did the demon know exactly who to possess? Or how long had that truck driver been possessed? Like, did it just go to the nearest body within a 50-mile radius and redirect the truck to try and see if they were going to get hunted down? How did the demons know which road? Or is there only one road from where they were to getting to a hospital, right? So how much foreknowledge or sense or omniscience, or, how do demons need a possessed person to be following somebody to have an impact? And how do you protect yourself against the fact that literally anyone around you could be possessed by a demon at any time and you wouldn't necessarily know? All really great questions to contemplate. And of course, the big glaring question at the end of the day is, well, they still have the Colt, or do they? Right? Because I think the truck driver, I think, gets out and takes the Colt from the car, I want to say. But maybe not. I don't remember exactly. But, are all three of them going to live? Are we going to see a different configuration? What's going to happen next? What is their next step now that they've gone up against Yellow Eyes and lost? Also, big questions to contemplate. Is Meg dead? Right? Again, was she actually unpossessed, or did she leave willingly? Was she exorcised? Because we also saw Yellow Eyes just leave John, but apparently his son did die because he got shot with the Colt. And what's going to happen next? Where do they go from here, right? They had a plan. They had a weapon. They'd been tracking, and they made their shot, right? They shoot their shot, I think that's how you say it. They made the pass. They tried, and they failed. And also now we know Sam and Dean are probably not going to be able to shoot their father or each other. I'm just going to throw in there, right? If any of them get possessed, because we've already seen that that's not really something they're going to be able to do. So with that in mind, what happens next? And will our intrepid heroes actually see the season premiere? Because that is a wrap, folks, for the end of season 1 and for this episode of Supernatural First Watch Podcast. So we've got a lot of questions to contemplate for the future. This is a very strong season finale. We've had a confrontation between the Winchesters and the Yellow-Eyed Demon. The Yellow-Eyed Demon clearly won, even though apparently the Yellow-Eyed Demon lost both of his children, or 2 of his children at least, in the process, both by unpossession and actual death, I would assume, through the use of the Colt. John was possessed at some point, so during a possession, then also the question is, since Meg knew what the demon was thinking, does the demon now know everything that their father knew because he possessed John? And what will that mean for the future of the Winchesters and the future of their hunt for finding this demon? And what's going to happen next? And, of course, will they survive the car crash? So, up next, we'll connect on the road again soon in Season 2's premiere, aptly named In My Time of Dying. So, we'll connect on the road again soon in Season 2 of Supernatural. Until then, you are listening to Supernatural First Watch Podcast. Don't miss out on future episodes. Subscribe to the show in your podcast player of choice. Got opinions, theories, or comments to share about the road so far? Send in your thoughts at the email in the show notes, and be on the lookout for the Patreon with special extra episodes coming soon about what we have seen on the road so far. Until next time, we'll connect again soon in Supernatural Season 2.